We're now in the second part of our presentation of Kantian moral philosophy of freedom. Here we're going to discuss the universal law formulation of respect for humanity. Previously, it was the end in itself formulation of respect for humanity, whereas here we're going to discuss the universal law formulation of respect for humanity. We're going to return to the old examples of stealing, lying, and murder and discuss them in terms of the universal law. And we will end with the now familiar notion of respecting humanity as an end in itself. There's another formulation of the categorical imperative. It is called the universal law formulation. Here is the formulation. An action is morally right if it is based on a principle that can be made into a universal law that all rational beings can follow. Let us now examine the three above examples, stealing, lying, and murder, from the standpoint of the second formulation. Kant argues that the above actions, stealing, lying, murder, are not moral because they are not based on principles that can be made into universal laws. Go ahead, if we made them into principles, this is what they would sound like. Go ahead and steal when it is advantageous for you to do so. Go ahead and lie when it is advantageous for you to do so. Go ahead and murder when it is advantageous for you to do so. Cannot be made into universal laws. If stealing was made into universal law, followed by everyone, the notion and practice of sanctity of property would be meaningless, and so would be the notion and practice of stealing. If lying was made into universal law, followed by everyone, the notion and practice of truth telling would be meaningless, and so would be the notion and practice of lying. If murder was made into universal law, followed by everyone, the notion and practice of sanctity of life would be meaningless, and so would be the notion and practice of murder. You could still commit those acts, but we wouldn't be able to really call them murder or lying or stealing if those were the legitimate norms of action. Let's put it slightly differently. If stealing is made into law, then there would not be anything like property or stealing. If lying was made into law, then there would not be trust in that anyone is telling the truth, and lying would not be possible. And if murder was made into law, we would soon have no one left. On the other hand, don't lie, don't steal, don't murder can be made into law. One important point from all of this is that lying, stealing, and murdering cannot be practiced as laws for everyone, but only as exceptions to universal laws that are broken by certain individuals. There are two final points of importance with regard to the universal law formulation based on what we have said so far about it. One, the moral problem with lying, stealing, and murdering as universal laws is not that they would make people unhappy, but that they cannot be practiced as laws for all rational, law-following beings at all. Two, and this is Sandel's point, if an action cannot be practiced as a law by everyone, but only by some individuals as an exception, it shows that those individuals are privileging themselves and their own desires over everyone else and their desires. And therefore, the action is not based on reason, but on something like self-like, self-love, or desire. The moral problem that Sandel points out with treating persons on the basis of desire and not on the basis of rational recognition of each rational being as an end in itself, and therefore not according to universal laws, is that all persons are not treated as having equal worth and as having inherent worth. A person who is made into a means to satisfaction of desires is assigned worth according to their leading to the satisfaction of their desire. They are not treated as having inherent and unchanging worth due to their rationality. This person is treated as useful rather than respected for having worth and value in itself. One day a person may satisfy my desires, another day they may not. One day more so, the other day less so. One day I have certain desires, other days I have other desires. If morals were based on desires, then no one ever would have anything like absolute, intrinsic, and unchanging worth. The worth of every person would be changing with desires. But we know that freedom of a rational being is something that has absolute worth, and therefore the morals of respect for freedom of rational beings cannot be based on desire, but must be based on reason itself. But does all of this mean that we do not respect persons, say, when we hire them to perform some service for us, insofar as we treat them as useful for our goals, such as, for example, when I pay a taxi driver to drive me to some address? Am I treating the driver as a means to my ends only and not as having ends in themselves? The answer is that I am treating the driver with respect and dignity appropriate to rational being, as I respect their rational choice to drive me. Let us remember that the categorical imperative states treat humanity and each persons not as a means only, but always also as having their ends in themselves. Thus, the driver was not treated as a means only, driving me, an instrument for me, but also at the same time as an end. Since they rationally choose to drive me, they are treated as an end in themselves. But does Kant then not end up as a libertarian who condones any agreement as just into which persons voluntarily choose to enter? The answer is no. In order to see why, we need to examine Kant's argument about the morality of suicide.